Welcome to the Pet Loss Journals podcast. I am your host Louise. This podcast is all about the reality and impact pet loss has on our lives, and I will be discussing my personal journey through pet loss. So if you are struggling on your own pet loss journey, then this is the podcast for you. It's episode 28. So today my journal entry is from the 18th of the 9th, 21. Now this journal entry is a little bit different, but it still is written down in my journal. Before I get going, this is about me being triggered by something in the environment. So it triggers my PTSD, my grief. This trigger was, I'll just give a little bit of a background info. I live in the countryside, on a little bit of a mountain, and I walk on the countryside roads every day. Try to get out for a walk for 30 minutes to an hour every day, and I kind of use much of the same route. Sometimes I go to different places, but I was on my route and I was halfway done and I was on the way back, and it's full of farmers. There are dairy farms everywhere, so it's a real countryside place that I live in. And there was this farmer that was out and about on his quad bike with his dog. So that is the background info. So the trigger was, I was walking back towards home and I heard the sound of a quad bike or something coming up from behind me, from the road behind me. And I was like, all right, it's just one of the farmers. So I thought that to myself. So I'll just begin reading now a little bit about this situation. So the trigger here was this farmer driving up behind me on his quad with his dog running alongside him on the road. Seeing the dog that looked exactly like Ozzy running down the road ahead of me alongside a farmer on the quad. So that was the trigger. My thoughts and beliefs surrounding this, these were: that dog looks exactly like Oz. Am I going to be seeing that dog every time I go for a walk? Because that will be really painful. That dog's appearance reminds me so much of Oz, and him running in the fields, that makes me feel really upset. I am picturing Ozzy dead in my back garden, remembering in detail what he looked like lying there. So the consequences of seeing all of this and experiencing this were my emotions, 80 to 90% anxiety and fear. My chest gets very tight. All my muscles tensed up. My breathing got faster. Panic attack happened for 5 to 10 minutes. What were the physical sensations? And I wrote these down. I felt lightheaded. I felt shortness of breath. I was trembling. And I was uncontrollably crying. What was my behaviour doing? And this is what I wrote down. I stopped walking. I bent down, hands on my knees. I wanted to ring Steve because I couldn't breathe, but I didn't ring him. I did some deep breathing eventually. And then eventually I walked home. And I've written here what alternative thoughts I had that I could have had at that time. It's okay to see the similarities. That dog was not Ozzy, but it's okay to be upset. The dog came out of nowhere and you got a fright. It's nice that that farmer has his dog with him, running by his side. It's okay to picture Ozzy lying dead in the garden. It was a traumatic event, but that was something that happened in the past, not right now in the present. And you're safe now. Oz is at peace. He's not in pain. So this journal entry was a little different because I was working on things with my CBT therapist. And that was something that I was working on. I was working on journaling about things that triggered me in the environment, my thoughts and beliefs, the consequences of of what happened, the physical sensations I was feeling, my behaviour, what I did, and then alternative thoughts that I could have had surrounding the situation. This is really, really helpful, and I have literally written them down heading by heading as I read them out to you. Trigger, thoughts, beliefs, the consequences, which were emotions, physical sensations, and my behaviour, and then alternative thoughts. What alternative thoughts could I have had? So I was writing these down for many, many situations that I was experiencing in the environment that caused me to have those post-traumatic stress responses and those breathing panic attack responses. And I know I've been talking quite a bit now about PTSD in the last few episodes, but I think it's important to still highlight that. And by journaling, it really helped me to put into perspective what was happening, especially the part at the end, alternative thoughts. This dog looked 98% like Ozzy. It was unbelievable. And if any of you know what Ozzy looks like, which I have pictures of him all over my Instagram page, if you're interested, I feel he is a Springer Spaniel, definitely, crossed with kind of a pointer breed or something like that. He has a white coat with lots of black speckled dots. He has a big round black spot on the top of his butt, and he had black ears and black around his face and eyes, so very pointer like. But the energy of a Springer Spaniel. So unique looking that I thought there is going to be no dog in this entire world that will look exactly like him, because he was so unique. He was very, very unique. And then this dog, boom, just came running up behind me alongside the farmer in the quad bike. And I think my brain told me that is Ozzy. And then my brain went into a spiral, into a space of fear and panic, and I was back in the back garden. I was back right there at home when it happened on that day. This PTSD sent me back there. And I kind of lost all hold of reality then and there. To this day, I have never seen that dog again, which is something that had caused me a lot of anxiety to go back out on my regular walks on the same road in the same area. But I've never seen that dog again, ever. And I kind of wonder if I was at a different space, in my grief healing journey, would I have seen that as a sign from Ozzy? Would I have seen it as like a little gift to say, I'm still looking out for you, I'm still around? I don't know, maybe. The fact that I've never seen that dog again, which is so unusual, it's so strange for where I live. I know the area, I know the dogs, I know the the people, and I get to know so much of this area that it's such a bizarre experience to have happened. And maybe I am right. I've never actually said that or thought that before until I've shared this journal entry, that maybe that was a sign, but I was in a space where that did not appear as a sign for me. It just caused me so much anxiety and pain. It was incredibly painful to experience that. To firstly think that's Ozzy, to then secondly be brought back to Ozzy's dead. You saw that, and then I go back to that space. So working through those thoughts, like the way I wrote them out, was incredibly powerful for me to journal on it. As soon as I got back inside the house, I sat down and wrote this journal entry, and I remember doing that. I was still crying, but I remember writing that journal entry. If you are somebody who experiences triggers like that and have really intense responses, and behaviour and physical sensations and everything, I highly recommend doing that journal exercise. Just to pop this episode on, and I will name it. I'll have trigger in the title, how we deal with triggers and so on. But that is something that's really, really important. So write out the trigger, what happened, write out a heading, thoughts and beliefs. What was my thoughts around it? Like I say, that dog looked exactly like Ozzy. Am I going to be seeing this dog every time I go for a walk? That dog reminds me of Ozzy running in the fields, that I'm picturing Ozzy dead in the back garden. Those were my thoughts and beliefs. Those were what was cropping up. The consequences under this heading is my emotions, my physical sensations, and my behaviour. So that was 89% anxiety and fear. The muscles tensed up, the physical sensations, lightheaded, shortness of breath, panic attack, trembling, uncontrollable crying behaviour. I stopped walking. I bent down. I wanted to ring Steve. I didn't. I did some deep breathing. I eventually walked home. But the walk home was, I was just crying continually. So then writing those alternative thoughts. What were their alternative thoughts that I could have had at the time? But you see, that's the thing about panic attacks specifically, is that we have to wait for our nervous system to regulate, to come back, to be grounded again. So doing things that will help you to become grounded again, so that we can regulate our nervous system to then think of alternative thoughts, or to take our phone out and write in our notes if we can, if we're in that situation. All of this that I am sharing with you is my own personal experience, and I'm not a qualified therapist, but I am qualified in grief and loss and educating people around that. So but everything that I share has helped me. It may not help you, but I am sharing from the greatest love in my heart, that I would hope that you don't feel so alone in this. Because not everybody will experience PTSD with pet loss. Not everybody will experience panic attacks or really severe anxiety. Not everybody will, and that is perfectly okay. If you do, that is normal, and if you do not, that is also normal. There is no set number of, symptoms or responses that you're supposed to experience when it comes to grief. There really, really isn't. But something that helped me, particularly that I implemented when I had to deal with these triggers. For example, another trigger was, I did a lot of driving. Obviously, I lived nearly 2 hours from where I was moved to, so I used to go home a lot and visit friends and family. So I used to drive. I was driving quite a lot. So a huge trigger that I would see on the road was obviously animals that got killed, foxes, etc., that were killed at the side of the road. And that was incredibly, incredibly painful for me to see. Sometimes I would have to pull the car over. In the very early days when I would get panic attacks from seeing this, because all I would see was, again, Ozzy in the back garden. So I'm being honest here, but some things that I implemented to help regulate my nervous system was, if I was in the middle of a panic attack, I would just wait for that to subside somewhat, and I would reach into my handbag and grab these Rollerball essential oils that I have. They are a mix of certain essential oils in like a small handheld tiny kind of glass tube with a roller ball on the top that people can roll on their wrists or on their temples, or just take a smell directly from the Rollerball bottle. And I would do that. I would roll some of the essential oil blend onto my wrists and onto my temples, sometimes a small little bit under my nose, to help to regulate my nervous system with those relaxing essential oils. So it's really, what it's doing is it's bringing me back to the present moment, back to reality, back to now, that this isn't happening right now, Louise, you are safe. This isn't happening right now, you are safe. It's bringing me back to there. Some other things that could be helpful is to name 5 things around you. If you're sitting in the car and that's happening, or anywhere else, just to name, lamppost, fence, gate, anything. Just name 5 things, name 5 smells, or name some smells if you smell them. The smell of flowers outside if you roll down the window, the smell of fresh grass, what can you see, what can you smell. Have something that you can hold, that you can touch, whether that is one of those little soft stress balls beside you in your handbag, whether that is crystals, which I haven't gotten into yet, but I do have quite the stash of crystals. Sometimes I pop those into my bra, into my pocket, into my handbag, close by. I'm holding one right now as I'm speaking to you. Different crystals have different healing effects, some for communication, some for love, for healing, for grief. But I'm planning to do a Patreon episode all about these things as well soon, and I will be sharing some really good crystal resources that I have used myself in the past to help with grief. These are completely personal for people as well, but the vibrations and energy that we can receive from crystals are really healing and can help to support us while we're going through deep grief. But yes, I am so glad to have shared that journal entry with you, because I was contemplating not, because it was part of my therapy work, but I think that it's relevant, and I think that it is possible for you, for the listeners, to do these exercises too in your journals. And I really do hope, actually, by now that all of you have a journal. Episode 28. By episode 28, I hope that you've ran out and got yourself a journal. Doesn't have to be anything pretty, you don't have to spend a fortune, just a lovely book with some blank sheets to journal on. Again, I will always link the free Pet Loss Journals guide that I always have in the show notes. I think it's a 20-something page document of pet loss journal prompts that can start you on the path of processing the suppressed or unresolved grief surrounding the death of your pet. But that is really, really helpful. People are downloading it all the time. I do these prompts every so often now and again. I did them when Puka went to his new adoptive home, and I did some of them, and they were really, really helpful for me. even recently. So yes, once again, I would love to mention the Patreon, and I release bonus episodes over on the Patreon, and there is more of an opportunity to connect directly with you, the listeners, over there with the chat function, and also with some upcoming live Zoom calls that people can join if you are a Patreon member. So your support keeps this podcast alive, and I want to thank you for that. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this week's episode. Remember, your pet loss grief is real, and it is so valid. Please be gentle on yourself. Until next time, take care.